Hello everyone, welcome to a new video with Identity Server 7. Today we are going to look into request object with Identity Server 7. So what is request object, right? So if you go down the memory lane, this request object comes in the OpenID core specification itself. And the primary objectives of this request object is to allow OpenID connect request to be passed in a self-contained parameter. Usually this is a JSON web token. Also, it allows claims to be obtained beyond the defined scopes. So this is a very important feature of request objects. And optionally, you can sign and encrypt this JSON web token to make your authorization request more secure. If you look into a sample JSON payload, so we have our usual stuff, the issuer, client ID, redirect URI, and the scope as well. And when you come down here, this is the important part, the claims. So even though we have defined OpenID here, we are requesting claims which belongs to other scopes in our request object. So if you see down here, so we are, even though we don't have the email scope here, we are requesting claims which belongs to the email scope here. We have the email, and also we are requesting given name which belongs to something like profile scope normally. And yes, and we are requesting like the birth date here as well. So this is a very useful feature of request object. Also, when it comes to financial grade API security, this becomes even more crucial, because in financial grade API security, for higher risk scenarios, our authentication request should be authenticated, and this is being achieved through request object through the message source authentication. So this plays a very crucial role when it comes to financial grade API security. So we can see this if you go down to the WSO2 documentation and go down to financial grade API. In the diagram itself, we see this part. So in the initial authorization request itself, we are using a request object here. So this is referring to the FAPI specification as well. Now let's see this in action in the demo. So I have logged into the Identity Server console, and I have already created an application to demonstrate request object. So let's go inside and see. So inside here, go to protocol. So I have enabled code grant type, and I have put the redirect URL. And if you go down, I have imported the public certificate for this application. So if you want to know how this setup is done, please go and watch our private key JWT video. So in there we have generated this public key and private key, and we have done this client application setup in that video as well. So please go and watch that. And if you come to use attributes, so I have enabled some claims so that we are able to request these particular claims in our request object. So under the email scope, I have enabled email verified and email, and under the profile scope, I have enabled the first name, last name, and the last modified time. So when you enable this only, you are able to request these particular claims in your request object. So for example, even if you request like middle name in your claims in your request object, you won't receive that since we haven't enabled that on the client application side. So that is something to note. Now let's see our JSON payload in our jwt.io website. So I'm using this website to generate this JWT token, and so we are using the PS256 algorithm, and I have imported the private key and the public key here to add our signature to our JSON web token. So in the payload, I have put the client ID in the client ID and the issuer, also the redirect URL. So under scope, I am using OpenID scope, even though I'm using OpenID. So under the claims section, I'm requesting claims which belong to other two scopes. So we are requesting email claim which belong to the email scope, and we are requesting the family name which belong to the profile scope. So this is the beauty of it, right? So under two different scopes, we are requesting two specific claims from two different scopes. So that's the beauty of request object. Now let's use this token and hit the authorization request. So let me configure the request parameter in the authorization request. So we are configuring this request parameter and we are putting the JSON web token that we generated. So let's go to Chrome, get a new tab and hit our authorization request. Okay, so we are redirected and let's hit admin username and password. Okay, so we have redirected and we have received our code. Now let's use this code to hit the token endpoint and receive our ID token. So I'm putting the code here, and also under authorization we are using the basic code using the client ID and client secret. Now here let's hit send. Okay, so we are receiving the ID token. Now let's decode this ID token using jwt.io, so we are able to see what's inside of it. So we have received exactly what we have requested in our request object. We have received the email and the family name only as the claims in our response. So this is the beauty of request object. We are able to cherry pick exactly what we need from multiple scopes. We have reached the end of this video, so let's look at summary of the things that we discussed in this video. So we discussed what is request object and how we can use request object to override the scopes and request additional claims if we want. Also we discussed why request object is important for FAPI. So when it comes to FAPI, we use request object for message source authentication. And we did the authorization request, requesting additional claims from multiple scopes in our demo. So that's it for this video. Please leave a comment if you have any questions, and thank you for watching.